The Haunting of the White House, a ghost story. It's a story that takes us to one of the most powerful places on Earth, the White House. But this isn't just a story about politics or power. This is a story about a ghost that has been seen by presidents, prime ministers, and even queens. This is the story of Abraham Lincoln's ghost and the eerie occurrences that have haunted the White House for over a century. Our story begins in 1865, a year that marked the end of the American Civil War and the tragic assassination of Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States. Lincoln was a beloved leader, known for his wisdom, compassion, and unwavering commitment to justice. But his life was cut short on April 14, 1865, when he was shot by John Wilkes Booth while attending a play at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. Lincoln's death sent shockwaves across the nation. His body was placed in a coffin and transported by train to various cities, allowing the public to pay their final respects. But even in death, Lincoln's presence seemed to linger. During this funeral procession, strange reports began to emerge. People claimed to see a ghostly train following Lincoln's funeral train. This phantom train was said to carry skeletal figures playing mournful tunes, as if escorting the president to the afterlife. These eerie sightings were the first hints that Abraham Lincoln's spirit might not rest in peace. Little did anyone know, this was just the beginning of a haunting that would span over a century. The first official sighting of Lincoln's ghost in the White House occurred during the presidency of Calvin Coolidge in the 1920s. Coolidge's wife, Grace Coolidge, was the first to report seeing Lincoln's ghost. She claimed to have seen him standing by a window in the Oval Office, gazing out at the Potomac River. Grace described Lincoln as a tall, somber figure, dressed in a black coat and top hat, his face etched with sadness. Grace's account was met with skepticism, but it wasn't long before others began to report similar encounters. Staff members, visitors, and even foreign dignitaries claimed to have seen Lincoln's ghost wandering the halls of the White House. One of the most famous accounts came from Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands, who was staying at the White House as a guest. One night, she heard a knock on her door. When she opened it, she was face to face with Lincoln's ghost. The Queen was so terrified that she fainted on the spot. One of the most chilling accounts of Lincoln's ghost comes from John F. Kennedy's presidency. Kennedy's security guard, John F. Kennedy Jr., claimed to have seen Lincoln's ghost on multiple occasions. According to Kennedy Jr., Lincoln's ghost would appear in the Lincoln bedroom, often sitting on the edge of the bed or standing by the fireplace. Kennedy Jr. described Lincoln as a sad, almost mournful figure, as if burdened by the weight of history. Kennedy Jr. wasn't the only one to see Lincoln's ghost during this time. First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy also reported feeling Lincoln's presence in the White House. She claimed to have heard footsteps in the hallway outside the Lincoln bedroom and felt a cold breeze even when the windows were closed. The sightings of Lincoln's ghost continued into the 20th century, with several presidents and their families reporting encounters. Franklin D. Roosevelt was one of the most vocal about his experiences. Roosevelt claimed to have seen Lincoln's ghost on multiple occasions, often in the Lincoln bedroom. He described Lincoln as a tall, shadowy figure dressed in a black coat, his face partially obscured by a hat. Roosevelt's wife, Eleanor Roosevelt, also reported feeling Lincoln's presence. She claimed to have heard him walking through the halls at night, his footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. The Roosevelt's accounts added to the growing legend of Lincoln's ghost, solidifying his place in White House folklore. The sightings of Lincoln's ghost reached their peak during the presidency of Harry S. Truman. Truman, a no-nonsense man who didn't believe in ghosts, was initially skeptical of the stories. But his skepticism was put to the test one night when he heard a knock on his bedroom door. When he opened it, he was face to face with Lincoln's ghost. Truman described the encounter as both terrifying and awe-inspiring. He later admitted that the experience had shaken him to his core. Truman's daughter, Margaret Truman, also reported seeing Lincoln's ghost. She claimed to have seen him standing in the hallway outside her bedroom, his face filled with sorrow. Margaret's account added to the growing body of evidence that Lincoln's ghost was a permanent resident of the White House. In recent years, sightings of Lincoln's ghost have become less frequent, but they haven't stopped entirely. President Ronald Reagan reportedly joked about Lincoln's ghost during his time in office, claiming that his dog would bark at empty corners of the room as if sensing a presence. President Barack Obama also mentioned feeling a strange presence in the Lincoln bedroom, though he stopped short of calling it a ghost. The most recent account comes from a White House staff member who claimed to have seen Lincoln's ghost in the basement. The staff member described Lincoln as a tall, shadowy figure dressed in a black coat, his face partially obscured by a hat. The encounter left the staff member shaken, but they chose to keep the experience private, fearing ridicule. To this day, the legend of Lincoln's ghost continues to captivate the imagination of people around the world. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, the stories of Lincoln's ghost are a testament to the enduring legacy of one of America's greatest presidents. His spirit, it seems, is as much a part of the White House as the building itself. So, dear readers, the next time you visit the White House, keep an eye out for a tall, shadowy figure in a black coat. You might just catch a glimpse of Abraham Lincoln's ghost, still watching over the nation he loved so dearly. The Cursed Script, a Hollywood horror story. The world of Hollywood is no stranger to tales of mystery, superstition, and the unexplainable. But few stories are as chilling and enigmatic as the one surrounding the cursed script of The Shadow of the Mountain. What began as a promising project for a major production house turned into a nightmare that claimed the lives of 7 people, leaving behind a trail of death, despair, and unanswered questions. This is the story of a script that seemed to carry a dark, malevolent force, one that refused to let anyone bring it to life. The origins of The Shadow of the Mountain can be traced back to the rugged, snow-capped peaks of Finland. The story was inspired by an old folktale about a beautiful woman who lived in the mountains. Her ethereal beauty captivated a young man from a nearby village who fell deeply in love with her. The woman, however, was no ordinary mortal. She was a spirit, a ghostly apparition who haunted the mountains, luring men to their doom. The young man, blinded by love, followed her into the wilderness, abandoning his family and village. He became obsessed with her, and his life spiraled into madness. The tale ended tragically, with the young man losing his mind and eventually his life, consumed by the ghostly woman's curse. This folktale was adapted into a screenplay by a talented writer who saw potential in its haunting narrative. The script was picked up by a major Hollywood production house, and the project was set to be a big-budget film. Little did anyone know, the script would bring with it a curse that would claim the lives of those who dared to touch it. The first actor approached for the lead role was John Fellowship, a rising star in Hollywood. John was known for his intense performances and his ability to bring complex characters to life. When he was offered the role, he was thrilled. The script was dark, mysterious, and unlike anything he had ever read before. John immersed himself in the character, studying the script and preparing for the role. But just 2 months after signing on, tragedy struck. John was found dead in his hotel room. The cause of death was ruled as a drug overdose, but those close to him insisted that John was not a drug user. Rumors began to swirl that the script had something to do with his untimely demise. With John's death, the production was put on hold. The search for a new lead actor began, and Richard Nation, a seasoned actor with a reputation for taking on challenging roles, was chosen. Richard was excited about the project and saw it as an opportunity to showcase his talent. But fate had other plans. Just a few months after being cast, Richard was involved in a horrific car accident. He was driving home from a meeting with the director when a drunk driver collided with his car. Richard died on the spot. Witnesses reported that in his final moments, Richard was talking to someone who wasn't there, as if he were having a conversation with an invisible presence. His last words were, "I don't want to die. Why? Okay." The curse didn't stop there. Michael D. Long, a close friend of Richard Nation, had been offered a supporting role in the film. Michael had heard the script from Richard and was intrigued by the story. But before he could even sign the contract, Michael suffered a sudden brain hemorrhage and died. He was only 34 years old. The next actor to be cast in the lead role was Candy, a talented performer with a bright future ahead of him. Candy was drawn to the script's dark themes and saw it as a chance to prove his versatility as an actor. But just 2 months after agreeing to the role, Candy was found dead in his apartment. The official cause of death was a drug overdose, but those who knew him insisted that Candy was not a user. By this point, the production was in shambles. The script had claimed 4 lives, and rumors of a curse were spreading like wildfire. Despite the growing fear, the production house was determined to see the project through. They approached Chris Farley, a beloved comedian and actor, for the lead role. Chris was hesitant at first, but he was drawn to the script's dark humor and complex character. He signed on, hoping to break away from his comedic image and take on a more serious role. But tragedy struck again. In December 1997, Chris was found dead in his apartment. The cause of death was a drug overdose, eerily similar to the deaths of John Fellowship and Candy. The curse seemed unstoppable. The script had claimed 5 lives, and the production was on the verge of collapse. But the worst was yet to come. A close friend of Chris Farley, who had heard the script from him, also met a tragic end. He was found dead in his apartment, a victim of a sudden illness. The final blow came when the girlfriend of one of the victims, who had also heard the script, took her own life. She left behind a note saying, "I don't know why I did it. I just felt like I had to." By this point, the production house had no choice but to abandon the project. The script was locked away, never to see the light of day. The deaths of 7 people, all connected to the script, left Hollywood in shock. Was it a curse? A series of coincidences? Or was there something more sinister at play? The writer of the script, who had initially dismissed the rumors as superstition, was left shaken. He refused to speak about the project, and the script was never published or shared again. To this day, the shadow of the mountain remains one of Hollywood's most chilling mysteries. Over the years, many theories have emerged about the cursed script. Some believe that the story itself was based on a real-life event, and the spirit of the ghostly woman from the mountains was angered by the attempt to bring her tale to life. Others think that the script was a conduit for dark energy, attracting misfortune and death to anyone who came into contact with it. Skeptics argue that the deaths were nothing more than a tragic series of coincidences, fueled by the power of suggestion and the human tendency to find patterns where none exist. But for those who were directly involved, the curse was all too real. The story of the Shadow of the Mountain serves as a chilling reminder of the power of storytelling and the mysteries that lie beyond our understanding. Whether it was a curse, coincidence, or something else entirely, the script's dark legacy continues to haunt Hollywood to this day. For those who believe in the supernatural, the cursed script is a cautionary tale about the dangers of meddling with forces beyond our control. For others, it is a tragic story of ambition, obsession, and the unpredictable nature of life. But one thing is certain: the script of The Shadow of the Mountain will forever remain one of Hollywood's most terrifying and enigmatic mysteries, a story that refuses to be forgotten. The Haunting of Robert the Doll, a tale of terror. It's a story that has fascinated and terrified people for over a century. A story about a doll. Not just any doll, but one of the most haunted and cursed objects in the world. Robert the Doll. You may have heard of Annabelle, the infamous haunted doll that inspired horror movies and nightmares. But today, we turn our attention to another doll, one that is equally, if not more, terrifying. This is the story of Robert, a doll with a dark history. A doll that has left a trail of fear and destruction in its wake. A doll that, even today, resides in a museum in Florida where it continues to terrify visitors and defy explanation. So gather around, dim the lights, and prepare yourselves for a journey into the unknown. This is the story of Robert the Doll. Our story begins in the year 1906 in the sunny state of Florida. In a quiet neighborhood, there lived a family with a young boy named Robert Eugene Otto. Robert was an imaginative child, full of curiosity and wonder. His family was well off, and they had several servants working in their household. Among them was a woman who had a particularly close relationship with the family, especially with Robert. This servant, whose name has been lost to time, was deeply attached to Robert. She would often spend hours playing with him, telling him stories, and caring for him as if he were her own. But as time passed, tensions began to rise between the servant and the family. The situation grew so strained that the servant eventually decided to leave the household. Before she left, however, she gave Robert a gift, a doll. It was no ordinary doll. It was a life-sized, handcrafted figure with a hauntingly realistic face, glassy eyes, and a sailor suit. The servant told Robert that the doll was a special gift, one that would always keep him company. Little did anyone know, this doll would become the source of unimaginable terror. Robert was overjoyed with his new toy. He named the doll after himself, Robert, and treated it as his closest companion. He would talk to it, play with it, and even sleep with it in his bed. The doll became an inseparable part of his life. But soon, strange things began to happen. At first, it was small, almost unnoticeable occurrences. Robert's parents would find his room in disarray. Furniture overturned, toys scattered, and belongings broken. When they asked Robert what had happened, he would insist that he hadn't done anything. "It was Robert," he would say, referring to the doll. His parents dismissed it as childish imagination, but the incidents grew more frequent and more disturbing. One night, Robert woke up to find the doll sitting in a chair across the room, staring at him. Its glassy eyes seemed to follow his every move, and its eyelids appeared to blink. Terrified, Robert screamed for his parents. When they rushed into the room, they found him huddled in a corner, pointing at the doll. "It was looking at me!" he cried. "It blinked!" The parents, though skeptical, couldn't ignore the fear in their son's eyes. They tried to calm him down, but the strange occurrences didn't stop. Night after night, Robert would wake up to find the doll moving on its own, walking across the room, picking up objects, and even whispering to him. The family began to suspect that something was terribly wrong. As if the disturbances in Robert's home weren't enough, the terror soon spread to the neighbors. People living nearby began to report strange noises coming from the Otto household, voices that didn't belong to anyone in the family. Furniture in their homes would move on its own, objects would break, and bed sheets would be thrown across the room. The neighbors were baffled and terrified. When they confronted Robert's parents, they were met with the same explanation: "It's the doll." The family had come to believe that the doll was responsible for the chaos. But how could a lifeless object cause such havoc? The neighbors were skeptical, but the evidence was hard to ignore. The disturbances became so severe that Robert's family decided they could no longer live in their home. They packed up their belongings, including the doll, and moved to a new house. For a while, things seemed to calm down. The strange occurrences stopped, and life returned to normal. Robert grew up, went to college, and eventually became a successful painter. He married and started a new life, leaving the doll behind in a box at his parents' home. But the doll wasn't done with him. Years later, Robert and his wife returned to Florida. While going through his old belongings, he stumbled upon the doll. Memories of his childhood came flooding back, and he decided to keep the doll as a memento. He set up a special room for it in his new home, complete with a wardrobe of clothes and accessories. At first, his wife thought it was harmless, a nostalgic keepsake from his childhood, but soon she began to notice strange behavior. Robert would spend hours talking to the doll, as if it were a living person. He would close the door to the room and refuse to let anyone else inside. The wife grew increasingly concerned, but Robert insisted that the doll was his friend. Then, the disturbances started again. Furniture in the house would move on its own, objects would break, and strange noises would echo through the halls. The neighbors began to complain, just as they had years before. Robert's wife, terrified and frustrated, gave him an ultimatum: "Either the doll goes, or I do." In 1974, Robert passed away, leaving behind the doll that had haunted him for most of his life. His wife, wanting nothing to do with the cursed object, donated it to the East Martello Museum in Key West, Florida. The museum, intrigued by the doll's dark history, put it on display for the public to see. But the doll's reign of terror didn't end there. Museum staff reported strange occurrences, objects moving on their own, unexplained noises, and even the doll's expression seeming to change. Visitors who took photos of the doll without asking permission found their cameras malfunctioning, or their pictures coming out blank. Some even claimed to hear the doll whispering to them. Today, Robert the doll remains one of the most haunted objects in the world. Visitors to the museum must ask the doll's permission before taking its photo, or risk facing its wrath. The legend of Robert the doll continues to grow, a chilling reminder of the mysteries that lie beyond our understanding. So, dear readers, the next time you find yourself in Florida, perhaps you'll visit the East Martello Museum. But beware, If you see a doll in a sailor suit staring at you with glassy eyes, remember to ask politely before taking its picture, because Robert is always watching, and he doesn't take kindly to disrespect. The Haunting of Madrid, a ghost story investigated by the police. It's a story that defies logic, a story that even the police couldn't fully explain. This is the story of Steffi, an 18-year-old girl from Madrid, Spain, whose life and death became the center of one of the most bizarre and terrifying paranormal investigations in history. This isn't just a ghost story. This is a story about a haunting so real, so undeniable, that it forced the police to step into a world they never believed existed. A world of ghosts, spirits, and things that go bump in the night. This is the story of the Haunting of Madrid. Our story begins in Madrid, Spain, a city known for its rich history, vibrant culture, and bustling metro system. In a quiet apartment in the heart of the city lived an 18-year-old girl named Steffi. She was a bright, cheerful college student with a loving family, her parents, a younger brother, and a sister. Life was normal, predictable, and peaceful. But that was about to change. One day, Steffi's behavior began to shift. It started subtly. She became more withdrawn, more introspective. Her family noticed that she was spending a lot of time alone in her room, often reading books on tantra and mantra, occult practices, and communicating with spirits. At first, they dismissed it as a phase, a teenage fascination with the mysterious and the unknown. But soon, things took a darker turn. Steffi began to exhibit strange behaviors. She would growl like an animal, scratch the walls with her nails, and make hissing sounds like a snake. Her family was horrified. They tried to talk to her to understand what was happening, but Steffi would only say that she felt a presence around her, a shadowy figure that she couldn't explain. She claimed that this figure would appear to her at midnight, and whenever she saw it, she would lose control of herself. Her parents, devout Catholic Christians, were deeply troubled. They removed all the occult books from her room, hoping it would help. But Steffi's condition only worsened. She began to have violent episodes, attacking her younger brother and screaming uncontrollably. Her health deteriorated rapidly, and her family was at a loss. They took her to doctors, psychiatrists, and even priests, but no one could explain what was happening to her. After months of suffering, Steffi's health took a critical turn. She was admitted to a government hospital in Madrid for a full checkup. The doctors ran every test imaginable, but they found nothing wrong with her. Physically, she was perfectly healthy. Mentally, however, she was a mystery. The doctors were baffled. 3 weeks into her hospital stay, something unthinkable happened. Steffi, who had been stable just hours before, suddenly passed away. The cause of death? A heart attack. But how could an 18-year-old girl with no prior heart conditions die so suddenly? The doctors had no answers. The autopsy report showed no signs of injury, no toxins, no underlying diseases, just a stopped heart. Steffi's family was devastated. They buried her in the local cemetery, following Catholic rituals, and returned home to grieve. But their nightmare was far from over. After Steffi's death, her family decided to preserve her room exactly as it was. They cleaned it meticulously, arranged her belongings, and locked the door, hoping to keep her memory alive. But within a week, strange things began to happen. The first sign was the state of her room. Despite being locked, the room was found in complete disarray. Bed sheets thrown on the floor, books scattered, and pictures hanging upside down. The family was shocked. They cleaned the room again, only to find it in chaos a few days later. This cycle repeated itself over and over. Then came the sounds. At night, the family would hear Steffi's voice calling out, "Mama, Mama!" It was her voice, clear as day, coming from her locked room. When they opened the door, they would feel a cold breeze, even though the windows were shut. The room would be a mess, and the atmosphere would feel heavy, oppressive. The family tried to rationalize it. They checked for intruders, for faulty locks, for anything that could explain what was happening. But there was no logical explanation. The neighbors began to hear the noises too, screams, growls, and the sound of furniture being dragged across the floor. Some even claimed to see shadows moving inside the apartment. As the haunting intensified, Steffi's family reached out to her former teachers for answers. What they learned was chilling. One of the teachers revealed that Steffi had been involved in occult practices with her friends. They had been trying to communicate with spirits using a Ouija board and other rituals. The teacher recounted an incident where she had caught Steffi and her friends performing a ritual in the schoolyard. They had placed a glass upside down on a wooden board and were attempting to summon spirits. When the teacher intervened, the glass had levitated and spun in the air, defying all logic. Terrified, the teacher had broken the board and sent the girls home. Steffi's family realized that their daughter's fascination with the occult had taken a dangerous turn. They began to suspect that Steffi had invited something into their home, something that refused to leave, even after her death. The haunting reached its peak one fateful night when Steffi's mother felt an invisible force choking her in her sleep. She woke up gasping for air, convinced that someone, or something, was trying to kill her. Terrified, the family called the police. What followed was one of the most bizarre police investigations in history. A team of 5 officers arrived at the apartment, skeptical but prepared for anything. What they witnessed left them shaken to the core. As soon as they entered Steffi's room, they felt a cold wind blowing, even though the windows were closed. Pictures on the walls flipped upside down, furniture moved on its own, and the officers heard disembodied voices whispering in the air. At one point, Steffi's younger brother was lifted off his bed and thrown across the room like a rag doll, right in front of the officers' eyes. The police were at a loss. How do you arrest a ghost? How do you gather evidence against something you can't see? They documented everything they witnessed, filing an official report that acknowledged the presence of paranormal activity. The report, which still exists today, is a chilling testament to the events that unfolded in that apartment. Unable to explain or stop the haunting, the police advised Steffi's family to leave the apartment. Desperate for peace, the family packed their belongings and moved to a new home. As soon as they left, the paranormal activity ceased. The ghost, or whatever it was, seemed tied to the apartment, to Steffi's room. The family never experienced anything like it again. But the story of Steffi and the haunted apartment became a legend in Madrid. It was even adapted into a Spanish horror film titled Veronica, which brought the chilling tale to a global audience. To this day, no one knows what truly happened in that apartment. Was it Steffi's spirit, trapped between worlds? Was it a malevolent entity she had summoned through her occult practices? Or was it something else entirely, something beyond our understanding? The police report remains one of the few official documents to acknowledge the existence of the paranormal. It serves as a reminder that there are things in this world that defy explanation, things that lurk in the shadows waiting to be discovered or feared. So, dear readers, the next time you hear a strange noise in the night or feel a cold breeze in a closed room, remember the story of Steffi and the haunted apartment in Madrid, because sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that are true. Until next time, take care of yourselves and your loved ones. And remember, some mysteries are better left unexplored.